Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, my insane psycho neighbor invades my privacy constantly. He put up spy cameras to constantly watch us, especially when we are in our pool. When he notices that we swim naked, he goes absolutely insane and pulls out his gun. Let's dive right into the story. The first one starts like this. I've been debating telling this story for a while, but finally I settled on writing it out for the world to see. Before I get into things though, I want to make a few comments about my neighbor that might be able to explain, but not excuse, his actions. I'm not a psychologist or doctor or anything, so I cannot say that I know exactly what's wrong with my neighbor, but there is something very mentally wrong with this man. I don't know if it is paranoia or PTSD or some other thing that I have never heard of before. I can say with certainty that he is 100% aware and in control of his own actions, and he understands what he is doing. With all of that out of the way, let us dive into what happened one day when I was in my yard with my wife. So here in Mexico it can get very hot, so we decided to build a private pool in our backyard as a way to cool off and beat the heat. We surrounded our yard with tall hedges, so there is no possible way somebody could look into our yard and see anything unless they were trying to. This is a big house because it means we can use the pool in the nude, which we like to do when it is very hot outside. It's probably the biggest benefit of having a private pool where we can do anything we like. My neighbor, on the other hand, installed cameras that we did not know about on his own property. The problem with these were that they were high up, and one even was on his roof looking into our backyard. He saw that we were naked in the pool and something must have snapped inside of him, because then he tried to kill us for it. He got on his own roof with a gun and started shooting at us while screaming about how we were naked. Of course, we did not know anything until we heard the shouting and the bullets. We dove underwater hoping for it to provide a little protection, and we were very lucky that we didn't get hit. His aim must have been really bad because all the bullets ended up hitting our grass instead of the pool area. When the shooting stopped, we ran inside and called the police to tell them about how the neighbor was on his roof trying to kill us. At this point we knew that he was a little off, but did not actually know how mentally unstable he really was. We waited for the police to arrive before we were willing to step outside again in fear of getting shot. We told them everything we knew, which was not much, and they went to go and try to talk to the neighbor and get him off of the roof. He was yelling that we were naked and couldn't do that kind of thing. I think the police assumed he was on drugs or something because they did not even talk to him and instead got him down and away from his gun before arresting him. My wife and I were still scared and asked what was gonna happen now. The police told us that he would be arrested for attempted murder for now, and he will go to a trial and we will see how things went from there. Despite him being gone, we were still shaken up and unwilling to go back out to the pool. Then the story takes a pause for a few weeks until we are called in to talk to a judge and get more information that we didn't know. We were told about the hidden cameras and asked if we wanted to add on a charge of stalking, for which we told them yes. We felt violated that he had been watching us for who knows how long with his cameras. We also got information that the gun was illegal and he didn't have any kind of permit or license to carry or use it. Finally, the most important piece of information we were given was that ruling would have to wait until he finished his mental health evaluation. Once they realized that he was not on drugs and still acting crazy, they figured there must be something mentally wrong with the guy. So then they want to make sure that he is okay to stand trial for his crimes. It turns out that he was partially able to stand trial, so he could give his side of the story for a defense the best he could. It meant though that if he was found guilty, he was gonna have to end up in a psychiatric facility instead of a normal jail. I have never been to court before, so I cannot tell you if there was anything different or special because of these circumstances that I mentioned before. All I know is that they were showing footage of his camera spying on us and even his own footage that was seized showing him opening fire and trying to kill us. When it was his turn to speak, the only thing he really said of use was that he shot at us because he saw with the cameras that we were naked. That set something off inside of him, and he claimed he was not in control of his actions and his anger was just controlling him instead. This is about when I understood that he might have not been totally in control of what happened, but that did not excuse the crimes he committed. We both got called to speak also and just said that we saw what we saw and felt during the entire situation. His side tried and failed to claim that we were publicly indecent from being naked, but the fact that our hedges are high and surround the property got us off from that. In the end, the neighbor was found guilty of attempted murder, stalking, and owning an illegal firearm. He was not given a sentence exactly, but was released into the care of a psychiatric hospital with a criminal unit until they felt it was safe for him to re-enter society. This man did own his home and hold a job, so he was an able man that could take care of himself. Once he was in the place though, he obviously couldn't afford to keep making payments on his house, and it ended up getting sold. I have no idea when or even if he will be released from the hospital he's being kept at. I know he is a sick man, but I still hope that if he does ever manage to be released, that I never see him again. I have sympathy towards people that are crazy like my neighbor, but I also have limits. Being shot at by somebody makes me never want to exist in the same space as them again. Since that day, we also have not used our pool, and our entire backyard is just an awkward place for us since the experience. I hope that he gets help, I truly do. The fact that he's no longer living next to me though gives me a sense of calm. I would have never imagined that just by being naked in my own private pool with my wife, that it would cause us to get shot at. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I gotta say, I just love this guy's logic. So being naked on your private property in your private pool where nobody can see you is indecent, but shooting at someone is apparently a decent act. What an idiot. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. And the next one is titled Defending My Aunt's Reputation from an Entire Village. Posted by user RedBlackDiamond on r/Ripe Stories. Okay, here's a short family tree to clear things up. So my grandma had 2 children, my mother and my uncle. My mother married my father and had me. My uncle married my aunt and had my cousin. Several years ago, my mother and uncle died within a year of each other from health issues. Background: ever since my uncle died, my aunt and my grandma became very distant, and at the same time, she got closer to my father and I. Grandma lives in a village about 30 minutes drive from the city the rest of us live in. While I have a car and regularly visit with my father, my aunt does not. After my uncle's death, my aunt started college at 48 years old. Between that, taking care of my cousin, work, etc., it's understandable that she didn't have time for anything else. She always complained about her full schedule, her lack of money and poor health, but no one in the family believed her. In fact, they all thought she was faking it for attention, but not me. I worked through college and I sort of related to her, but the rest of the family kept trying to convince me to just let her go, but I didn't. Because of the low contact between them, my grandma started to somewhat resent my aunt and would often badmouth her when she wasn't around, to me, to my father, and I'm sure to her neighbors. Her village is small, a little over 1,000 people, so everybody knows everybody and no doubt old people gossip. Now to the story. Well, long story short, my grandma died recently. Since her kids were dead too, her property, her house and the surrounding land are to be inherited by me and my cousin. Keep in mind that my aunt and father have no claim to anything. Anyway, because of my aunt's reputation in the family and the village, I hear people saying all over the place that she does not deserve anything. Or that she will sell it at the second she gets her hands on it. Like I said, she's not getting anything. My cousin turned 18 a few months before grandma's death, so he can claim his share for himself, but people keep talking as if she is. So I've been trying to dismiss as much as I can, but some weird things have been happening lately, all rumors with no concrete proof. Now, all this I've heard from my grandma's next door neighbor. I stopped to chat with her for a while and she said I should talk to my aunt that when she wants to sell her part of the property, I should convince her to sell the land and to leave the house alone. After I repeatedly told her that nobody sells anything, she told me that she heard that somebody posted an announcement online about our property being for sale. I pull out my phone and searched on the spot and surprise, surprise, nothing for sale in that village altogether, let alone our specific property. Next, she told me the other day 2 strangers in a car came by to look at our house and they talked to her. They said they heard of the insert grandma's name's house being for sale and they came to look at it. She politely told them nothing is for sale and to please leave. She suspected my aunt had something to do with it. I, on the other hand, knew that my aunt is supposedly gonna sell everything mindset was already implanted in people's minds, so those guys could have heard it from anywhere. I told her this and I repeated that my aunt has no right to sell anything, let alone without my consent. Next, she started ranting how I deserve everything because she remarried anyway, so she has no more claim to this. I was mute, shocked, you name it. I've heard a lot, but nothing like this. I immediately asked her where the hell she pulled that out from, and she said she heard from someone, of course, that someone called my aunt with a different family name. I asked what name it was, and it was her effing name, but before marriage, but nobody knew that, so they assumed she got married again. I've heard enough at this point. I told her to stop believing everything she hears on the street from now on, to tell anyone who brings it up that anything regarding the sale of the property and my aunt's bad intentions is the fakest rumor in this village's history. Not in those words, but you get the idea. Now, every time I see someone on the street over there, they keep trying to convince to let her go, that she's manipulating me and I'm insulting my grandma who hated her. Honestly, I'm considering selling the property myself at this point just to get rid of them. And yeah, honestly, in my opinion, there's nothing worse than people who have nothing better to do in life than to talk crap about others behind their back and to gossip. I guess these people don't have anything better to do. Sad life. The next one is titled, All You Want Is a Ride Home? Sure, but it's gonna cost you. Posted on our own subreddit. So this happened about 20 years ago, when our daughter was barely a year old, if that. I and the wife were living in her mother's double-wide mobile home and just paying the lot rent and power, which was fine for a newlywed couple with a baby. A little bit of backstory is needed here. So my mother-in-law, MIL, had been dating a guy on and off for years, and he was well known in the town as being the town drunk. Small farming/agriculture city right off the interstate with about 3,000 people or less. And my boyfriend had at least one DUI and at the time could not drive without the interlock device. Or actually, he's talking about the boyfriend of the mother-in-law, I guess. But anyway, so he walked, again small city, went to the bar and got crap-faced and generally walked or got a ride from someone home. Well, on this fateful night, I and the wife were watching TV, baby was asleep in her room when we saw shadows outside and heard knocking at the door. We quickly concluded that it was the boyfriend knocking on the door and we ignored him. He stopped the knocking and we assumed he left, but suddenly he started knocking on the other door and then the windows. At that point in time we knew he was not gonna leave and we didn't want him to wake up the baby, so I grabbed a cell phone that we didn't have service but still worked for emergencies and called 911. I told the dispatcher, boyfriend's name, is trying to break into our home at address XYZ and the dispatcher is in a different city within the same county around 45 miles away, and his response was, "I know that name," referring to the boyfriend, and he sent the city police, 2 cars and the county sheriff's deputies that happened to be hanging out with the city boys. Just as I was calling 911, he opened the door that we had forgotten to lock and tried to come in. He was super drunk and kept saying, "I just want a ride home." And we told him to hang tight, we have a ride coming for you. The PD was less than a mile from where we lived, so they were at our home within 2 minutes of the call, and since they knew who he was, they approached from 2 different locations and a couple even had their guns out. They quickly grabbed him and cuffed him, and one of the officers asked my wife if we wanted to press charges for breaking and entering, or attempted breaking and entering, since it was her mom's trailer. She declined but told him never do that again, and one of the city officers, a female, told him, "You're lucky that you didn't wake up the baby, because if you did, I wouldn't care what she, wife, said. I would haul your ass to jail in a second." He kept muttering that all he wanted was a ride home. Can't I just get a ride home? So one of the other officers asked me if I would be willing to drive him home, and before I could say anything, my wife said yes, but only if he pays. So the officer asked him how much money he had on him. It was 20 or 40 bucks, and made him give it to me before telling him that he could go, just never do that again because they all know who he is and where he lives, and they wouldn't be nice the second time around. So the malicious compliance here? Well, he got a ride home, alright, but it cost him whatever money he had left and he was scared sober, or so I would like to think. He honestly didn't think what he was doing was wrong, by his own admission. He never tried again, and mother-in-law finally got tired of him and broke it off with him because, as she said, if she had to choose between her granddaughter and daughter or her boyfriend, her granddaughter and daughter is gonna win every time. And yeah, ripe stars, I don't know about you, but for me, dealing with drunk people is just one of the worst things ever. I really dislike that. Especially if you are sober yourself. If you ever had any bad experiences with drunk people, feel free to let us know in the comments. The next one is titled, "Don't like it? Leave." When I was younger, I worked as an engineer for a small company. The owner, who I will call Jake, let me know before I started that I would be doing about 10-hour days, 6 days a week for about 6 months, but also that I would have to be flexible. Some days they wouldn't have work for me and other days I would be expected to stay a few hours late. This did not bother me too much as I was not too tight for money and I did not mind staying behind a few extra hours occasionally. I got to work and was told to follow instructions from the owner's brother Steve. He was an arrogant character who always thought he knew how to do everyone else's job better than them. We butted heads a few times but nothing major. A few months in, I found a new job starting in a week that paid better. Later on that day, I had another disagreement with Steve. The situation was petty, but it's his response that really confused me. It ended with him screaming in my face, "If you don't do as I say, then you can leave." So I packed my stuff and left. Steve was a little confused, thinking I would just fall in line. He was too arrogant to apologize and I had a job lined up. Side note for people not in the UK, I was working a 0-hour contract. This means I get an hourly wage, but I'm not afforded some labor rights like a set salary, minimum work hours or notice for dismissal. This works both ways though, so I can leave the job whenever I want with no notice. I decided to call up Jake since he had always been chill and told him what happened. He told me he needed me and I should just return to work. I told him unless he controlled Steve and made him apologize, there was no way I was coming back. He refused, so I told him I would send in my final timesheet. 2 weeks later and I've started my new job. I still have not been paid for my final week, so I called Jake. He told me that, "Since you didn't give notice for leaving, you owe me for last product of work." He said if I didn't like it, I should sue him and recommend I should just take the loss and move on. This was obviously complete BS. A couple months go by until I finally find time to file for small claims court. Few days after sending him notice, Jake paid my money including court fees and extras. He actually called me up apologizing for the confusion. He wanted to know when I could return to work. I had heard from one of my ex-co-workers that because of the infrequent hours, people would leave as soon as they were told they wouldn't have work the next day. Others would leave when they realized how much of a jerk Steve was. They had gone through about 7 different workers in the time I was gone and struggled to keep anyone for more than a week. I told him I would think about it. I managed to string him along for a few weeks before he stopped calling me. The moral of the story is that if you think you're being treated unfairly, you shouldn't just put up with it. Your self-respect is not worth compromising. Don't settle for being treated like crap, especially when you're willing to go above and beyond for them. And yeah, ripe stars, I would say that's a very good motto to live by. I think having a decent amount of self-respect is extremely crucial, especially when you want to keep a good life-work balance. Neighbor trespassed and released a rattlesnake into my RV. I know that from the title alone you might be thinking that I am exaggerating something. I promise you that not only is this a true story, but the title does not even begin to explain how weird of an experience this was. Now, I live in an area that, depending on who you are, you might see us and classify us as rednecks. Me and neighbor both live in an RV park next to each other. We absolutely hate each other and get in pretty consistent arguments. I also cannot really just move my RV somewhere else because the park is full of a lot more people recently living in the park. Nobody would switch with me because, well, nobody wanted to be next to neighbor if they could help it. Out of everyone, he was probably the loudest owner there and would get drunk almost every single night. While he was sober or drunk though, he always wanted to start fights about anything he could think of. This time though, we were in an argument because he did not like where I started throwing out my garbage. He considered it his spot for whatever reason and decided he needed to create a huge stink about it. There are no designated spots either, so I really don't know what he was on about. All I know is that I started waking up to trash right by my door and I was not going to back down and let him get away with it. What followed was several days of retaliation of putting trash on each other's properties after asking him to stop and not getting anywhere with that. I really didn't think things would escalate to where they did from just that. I guess though that he really did not like the idea of anyone trying to fight back against him, so he was going to do something crazy like the guy he is and trying to get me killed. I did not even know what was going on at first though, because I saw him close to my RV and honestly thought he was putting more trash near it. Me? Get away from my home! Neighbor?
That's not a nice way to talk to your neighbor.
Me? What the hell are you doing over here?
You will see.
We walked away and I went to look where he was to see if any more trash got dumped. It did not seem like he did though, so I just brushed it off as him trying to piss me off and rile me up. I did not think anything else of it, so I went back into my RV to try and relax for a while. Everything seemed pretty normal, and then I saw something moving on my floor. It was a snake, and I would say right now that I'm not a huge fan of snakes. I'm sure that he was right outside enjoying my screams of terror. Luckily, I was in arm's reach of my kitchen and was able to grab one of those big knives for cooking. The snake was looking at me like I was dinner and starting to jut out towards me. I swung the knife like a maniac, trying to keep it back so it couldn't bite me. I will admit that it was pure luck that the timing ended up with the knife slicing the snake and having it die right there on my floor. I didn't like this, but a dead rattlesnake on my floor was better than a living one trying to kill me. I knew right away that neighbor put him there, so I called the police and animal control. That was when they identified it as a rattlesnake, but there was something very odd about it. On its tail the rattle was missing, so I was not able to hear it coming towards me until it was right there. They say that it looked like it had been ripped right off of the snake. That would explain why it was so angry and wanting to attack though. The neighbor literally ripped the rattle off of the snake. Now, I did not have any solid proof that he was the one that did it, but me seeing him by my property right before gave them enough suspicion to go and talk to him. He actually was dumb enough to let them into his RV where they saw the rattlesnake's rattle just sitting there. He was arrested and taken away screaming that I set him up and he was innocent. It was clear though that the cops did not believe him, and after a few more questions for me, they left my RV as well, thankfully with the dead snake for evidence. I did have to go to court to give my side of the story of what happened so the judge could get a clear picture of what happened before anything else. So I told him, and while I was sitting there listening to other things, I found out that he did in fact admit to ripping off the snake's rattle using his hands, a knife, and even his own teeth. Still, it probably would have only been a misdemeanor and gotten off easy if he had a half-decent lawyer and seemed sorry. Obviously, that is not what happened if you've been paying attention to what this guy was like. The entire time I was trying to recount the events, he was interrupting me and having the judge warn him to stop. Before the entire thing was over, he was removed from the courtroom for not being able to shut his mouth and behave. It was kind of unbelievable that he was acting that way in front of the judge that was going to decide to send him away with a fine and warning or send him to a criminal trial. Turns out at the end of the day, they charged him for what was probably the highest counts they could get away with. Abuse of an animal, trespassing, and deadly conduct because of what the rattlesnake could have done if I didn't kill it first. The trial has not happened yet, but he is in custody because he has no money to pay for the bail in the meantime. His RV is still parked next to me, but since he cannot pay for obvious reasons, it will probably get towed away soon to make room for someone that can pay. To think that all of this could have been avoided if he didn't throw a fit about me throwing my garbage in his spot and then turning up the fight to 100 by thinking releasing a snake to attack me was a good idea. I still have no idea where he got the snake from because rattlesnakes are not really native here, so it must have been the most thought out plan he ever came up with since he moved in next to me. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching, and please don't forget to check out my playlists for more awesome videos. Also, if you haven't already, I would very much appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell to not miss any videos. Thank you so much. I will see you again tomorrow.